The talk this week is about making mistakes, and it is something that we absolutely just must do in life and in practice and martial arts and meditation. There just is no life and no excitement. Nothing is interesting without mistakes. Can you imagine how boring things would be if you just knew everything, you did everything right from the beginning? You would just have the most abysmal existence. We have to make mistakes, and this is where learning and fun comes from. So the question of the week is, it starts with a kind of a proposition or something that we assume to be true, which may or may not be true for everybody, but it is, we know that we learn from our mistakes. And maybe you at least get this intellectually, but the experience of life is not so much that you learn from all your mistakes. But let's just pretend you learn from all your mistakes. So yet we are still afraid to make mistakes. And so the question of the week is, where in your life is this the most true? But I'm not so interested in the specifics of that. It's really just like, you know that you make mistakes and you know that you learn from them. You try to learn from them at least. And so we'll kind of talk about that process and to enjoy making mistakes and to have a kind of a different mindset from most people, or from maybe how we did before this class started. So why are we afraid of making mistakes? The stakes seem so high sometimes, and sometimes they are high. I gave like a tiny version of this talk to the kids earlier today, and I talk all about how it's important to make mistakes and enjoy making mistakes, but you don't need to make excess mistakes or mistakes that you already have learned from in the past. And you don't need to make mistakes by doing things that you absolutely know are not right. So you don't need to walk out into traffic and like try that out and see how it goes. You already know that that's wrong. The stakes are not usually that high. But let's say that you're like in class and the stakes in Kung Fu are you mess up and you get punched. That's not fun. Well, I kind of like it, but most people, it's not fun getting punched. And usually in life, the stakes might not seem quite that high, but sometimes they're higher. I mean, you get punched in the nose, that sucks. You might get a bloody nose, but it's not like you're permanently scarred. Your nose will heal and you'll show back up the next day and be fine. But in life, it's like, I make the mistake and maybe I look so bad that instead of having a physical injury, I have an emotional or ego injury that just sticks with me forever, or can seem to stick with me forever. I'm worried about it sticking with me forever. Looking bad, looking dumb, just is one of the worst things for a human being, and we really do place so much importance on this and make it seem so bad that it can stop us from doing making all kinds of fun mistakes. And sometimes, sure, the stakes are high. You make a mistake and you get fired from your job. Okay. But generally speaking, it's fine. Hello, gentlemen, come on. The mistakes are, you made a wrong turn and you're late to meditation class, or you do something and it is kind of in a moment, you feel dumb. Looks like you got the exact number of cushions. Great job. And still we survive to make a mistake the next day. Really the thing that stops us, the issue that most of us have with making mistakes, is that feeling dumb or looking dumb. And I had a great student ask a great question in the Kung Fu class earlier. She's like, in this class, I kind of feel like it's rough. Sometimes I feel like people are watching me, like I'm on display. I'm kind of worried about the person behind me, hitting me. And it is that kind of feeling of other people are watching me, and I'm worried about, how I look. I'm worried about, even though I understand intellectually that this might not be happening, it still feels like the pressure is on and people are watching. And if I look dumb now, everyone's going to remember it. And I reminded her something that she probably doesn't need much reminding of, but maybe some of the rest of us do, which is that we're not the center of the universe. We are maybe the center of our own universe, but nobody else cares about us very much, right? I mean, I have a daughter who I love very much, but I still don't think of her that much as we all think that everybody is paying attention to us, right? If it were actually the case that people thought about us as much as we think that they are, it would be such a crazy life that we would live. You're like a celebrity. We are all in our own minds like the world's biggest celebrity. We think everybody's always paying attention to us. The truth is, everyone is their own biggest celebrity. Everyone is their own center of their own universe. And so we're all just kind of in our own heads thinking about ourselves. Maybe we're worrying about what other people think about us, but that is very often the extent of how much we think about other people. So try to remember that intellectually, and then try to just get it into your bones, right? The more often you can remind yourself that it's just not about me. It really is about, the experience that I can help my partner have, for example, in class. It's about how can I help this person out there in the world rather than like, what are people thinking about me? All that is just kind of in our imagination. So, how to learn from mistakes? Because if we're not learning from our mistakes, it's no longer going to be a great experience. We really want to try to learn from our mistakes. I had this, one of the biggest mistakes that I made is going to sound so unimportant, but to me, it still sticks in my mind because this happened at the school in Japan where Ueshiba Sensei taught Aikido, and this is like a spiritual mecca for lots of people like me. They travel from across the world to study here, and I had never been in the school before. I had heard stories about it from my Sifu practice there, and I had the great opportunity for about a week in Tokyo to practice at the school. And I made multiple mistakes, and the people there were so nice because the etiquette in Japan is all like being so gracious and not making somebody feel bad for their mistakes. But that made it even worse for me because I knew that they were just being so nice. The first thing was I really wanted to practice with the more advanced students. And try not to remember this story too much the next time that you see me, because this was years ago. So even though this might sound terrible to some of you, I hope that I'm a better person and I've learned from it. But I thought, like, I've been practicing a lot of these techniques for over a decade. I'm getting pretty good at them. I can at least fall correctly. So I thought it would be really nice if I could practice with the black belts. And I asked the person who was at the front desk of the school, like, is it possible for me to, sit in on or participate in the black belt class? And he looked at me and he gave me a look that I should have interpreted. I did interpret it, I think, correctly, but in the moment I just let it go. But he gave me a look that was like, this is kind of an audacious question that you're asking right now. But what he said was, if you want to watch the class and you think that you can do it, then you can go ahead and do that. And so I went up and I watched the class, and I didn't know necessarily enough to know that what I was looking at was probably too hard for me, but I looked at it and I was like, I think I can do that. I told the guy, he's like, okay, you can come back tomorrow and do it. So I came back the next day, I participated in the class. That was my first mistake. I just should not have been in the black belt class in the first place. The second mistake that I made was I changed into my gi. I walked out and I sat because I saw the line. They line up differently there. If this is like the door to come in, they line up like going this way. So the line ended like right at the door, and I'm like, oh, there's a spot right here for me. So I sat right there, and then the teacher came out and he looked right at me. I'll look at you, pretend that Jonah is me. He looked right at me and he's like, that's the entrance. Don't line up there. and so I was like, yes, sir. And I moved back and I sat in the back and lined up. And the rest of the class was kind of fine. But that was a fairly innocuous mistake. Like, not that big of a deal, probably. Could be worse. But that sticks in my mind because he looked at me and called me out in front of everybody. There was like 50 people in this class, and it's like such a small, dumb thing, yet it still sticks in my mind. And being in the black belt class, the teachers let me do, I think, 2 or 3 classes before they finally, in the nicest possible way, looked at me in the middle of class and said very loudly, "There's a beginner's class." And now they all kind of had a nice attitude about it. Nobody was like mean to me. Like, it was all very polite. The etiquette was like super nice. But this was as clear of a sign of like, you should not be in this class, and you definitely should not be lining up in front of the door so that nobody else can come into class. So that, believe it or not, those are 2 of the biggest mistakes that I can remember making in my martial arts practice, and therefore in life, because so much of my life is about martial arts. And I think about this probably once every other month or so. I go through all of that. It's been 12 years since this happened. And every time I remind myself, if I went back to Japan and visited the Hombu dojo, which I absolutely would if I went back there, I would not be too afraid to go back in there, I would not go to the black belt class, and I would not line up in front of the door. Now, I might make other mistakes. I would probably make tons of other mistakes, but I wouldn't make those exact same mistakes again. Partly because I keep thinking about them over and over again. But I just remind myself, like, this is actually, it is fine that this happened. I did not lose my soul. I didn't bring dishonor onto myself and all of martial arts because I lined up in the wrong place. It was a mistake that I made, and I can get over it. I would just not do the same thing twice. So this is the number one way to learn from mistakes, is just don't do the same thing twice. Now, I could line up in a different wrong place next time. Or maybe I could go to a different class, and maybe they would say, you shouldn't be in the beginner class, you should be in the blue belt class, or whatever they would say. I don't know. But at least I would try not to make the same mistakes twice. Now, very often in life, that is, maybe it's not quite as black and white, cut and dry, and maybe we don't recognize the mistakes the first time because there's not like a Japanese man yelling at you in front of a class of 50 people. It's things that we might not recognize until we've made the same mistake several times. But if we are aware enough to recognize the mistake the first time, wonderful. That's so great. Like, this is the number one thing that we have to do, is just recognize the mistake. So very related to that is we have to try different things. And when we recognize that this thing is a mistake, that shouldn't stop us. That should just invite us to try something else. And in class, what does that look like? Like, let's say jiu-jitsu, the last class. Jiu-jitsu is all just making mistakes. And you want to try to make as many mistakes as possible, but different mistakes. You don't want them to catch you in the same thing over and over and over again. Now, maybe they do, and you tried to escape one way, so the next time I try to escape a different way. Well, that didn't work either, so now I try a different way of escaping. And eventually, we arrive at something that works, right? In life, we want to just do the same thing, right? We're trying all kinds of different things. And this is very much the way that it works in art. There is a great, I don't know if you would call this a study, but I call it a study. It's a thing that happened in a photography class. And they took a class, and I don't know if it was 2 different classes or one class they divided in half, but they took a group of students and they said, your whole grade for this class is based on the one best photograph that you turn in. You're only turning in one photograph, and your entire grade is based on it. And the other half of the students, they said, your grade is based purely on the number of photographs that you take and turn in. So you take 100 photographs, you get 100%, you get the highest grade, right? I don't know if it was 100 or 1,000 or whatever, but that's it. So And then I told this story to the kids earlier today, and I think that some of you probably are in your brain trying to figure this out right now, but everybody thinks that, of course, the best photographs that are taken, not necessarily the highest grade, but the best quality photograph comes from the group of people who turn in their one best photograph, right? And that seems to make sense. They're putting so much time and energy into this. They get the lighting just right, you know. They frame it up perfectly and do all of this. Yet what they found was all of the best photographs that were taken in this class were taken by the second group, whose job was just take as many photos as you can. And that does not mean that all of these photos were better than these photos. Surely these photos were probably better than a lot or even most of these, but all of the best photos came from this group. And the reason this happens is because they just tried so many different things. They tried and failed and tried again. They learned from their mistakes. And so this is the whole idea of just trying lots of different things, right? Our best stuff is going to come not from kind of tiptoeing through life, being too afraid to show up to the Hombu Dojo to do class in the first place, right? Trying to not make any mistakes with the photograph, but make lots of mistakes and learn from everything that we do. And then the best stuff will always come from basically throwing all of these, taking all these shots. And that is kind of a freeing way to go about things. Again, you can't do that with everything. You're not going to be like, I think I'm going to become a better driver by just zigzagging across lines and seeing how that goes. I'm going to become a better martial artist by trying to do these punches different ways. I'm going to become a better artist at whatever I'm doing by trying different things. And on some level, it is a numbers game, right? If I do one punch, this is what Bruce Lee said, I'd rather fight somebody who knows 1,000 kicks and has done them all once versus somebody who knows one kick and has done it 1,000 times. This is kind of like the opposite of what I was saying before, but all of the effort, all of the times that you put into doing this, you end up with something that is magical seeming, basically. It's so good at such high level because of all the reps that have gone into it. I think the best actual photo in the class would have been the one photograph, but you take it 1,000 times and you will end up with the best thing. Tanya would probably disagree with me. She's an actual photographer, but you get the idea. You want to take lots of shots, and the numbers game tells us that we will eventually end up with something great. It's no different in meditation. So a lot of times we get hung up on like trying to do the perfect meditation, trying to meditate right, and you can try lots of different kinds of meditation. I absolutely encourage you to do that. There are thousands of styles of meditation out there. You can try within this specific style of meditation where we're just sitting and breathing and watching the breath. You can try sitting in different ways. You can try focusing on the breath in different ways. Just a simple example. When you focus on the breath, most of you have just chosen a way to feel the breath and have just stuck with that from the very beginning. And that's not wrong. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it. But you can also experiment with, like I do most of the time, I'm feeling the breath in my belly. You can also feel the breath coming in and out of your nose. You can feel the breath as it goes through your throat. You can kind of expand your awareness to your entire body and feel how your whole body feels as you're breathing, like you're breathing into your toes and into your fingers and into your hair. And so there's just one way that you can kind of change things. And you can actually try to change it up every time you meditate. And that will kind of be freeing to us as well. But on some level, meditation is kind of the practice of making a mistake and letting go of it. What I mean by that is likely the meditation that you're about to have tonight I mean, my fingers are crossed for you, but likely this is not the perfect one meditation. This is not the one that you end up being a Buddha at the end of it. Maybe, it could happen. But also, that's a bad way of thinking of meditation. You're not trying to do the one perfect meditation. What you want to do is make like 1,000 mistakes in this meditation. The mistake being like when your mind wanders. And if you treat it like a mistake, in the same way that we think about, not getting bogged down by the other mistakes in life, we don't want to get bogged down by the mistake in meditation. You kind of chuckle at yourself and remember that you are a human being and it's okay, and you just move on to the next thought, the next breath. And meditation is on some level just the practice of letting go of that. We let go of that thought that we were attached to. We let go of that persistent thought that keeps showing up, and we just return back to the breath. And in that way of practicing letting go, we get really good at it. We get really good at letting go and just returning back to the present. And so then we should be able to take that into everyday life. We make a mistake and we just let go of it. And it doesn't mean that we don't learn from it. In meditation, it's a little bit different because you're not learning from necessarily the thought that you're having, like, this is a bad thought and I need to change the thought that I'm having. It's more like you're learning because you're practicing recognizing it. You're practicing recognizing a thought. You're practicing recognizing a mistake. And that is something that we need to get really good at. Practice recognizing the mistakes. In meditation, it's simple because you practice letting go of it and coming back to the breath. In life, we practice recognizing the mistake, and then we can change it to something different. So when we're meditating tonight, I said the word mistake 1,000 times tonight. Again, I don't think that it's actually very helpful to think of the mind wandering as a mistake, unless you have a really good attitude about making mistakes. If you do, then great. You can think of them as all happy mistakes and great opportunities to focus back in on the breath. But instead, we want to have this kind of light attitude towards it, this light experience when we're meditating, instead of feeling very heavy and bogged down by every time we mess up and we have to come back to the breath and it's like, oh, I keep messing up. It's light. It's like we recognize the thought, we recognize the mistake, and it just floats away. It just like completely dissipates into nothing. In life, if it's a mistake that we make that we want to learn from, we don't necessarily let it totally dissipate into nothing, but in the moment, when we are trying to do something, like we're trying to meditate, or you're trying to move out of the way of the next punch that's coming at us, then you have to be able to let it go and just be focused. So there's a balance here. If you notice that you spend so much time fixating on your mistakes, it's a truly egregious mistake, like lining up in the wrong spot in the dojo, then you want to practice giving yourself some grace, some levity, and just let it disappear. And we can remember our mistakes, and we can learn from them without being attached to them and without carrying them with us for the rest of our life. So if nothing else, try to take this practice into everyday life where we recognize it, and then we at least tell ourselves, but then likely take some kind of action that will make it so we don't make the exact same mistake again. You can make a at least slightly different mistake and keep doing that until you arrive at the right thing. But try to make it feel the way that it should in meditation, where we recognize it and then we let it go. If you need to write something down and say, next time this happens, I'm going to change it and do this instead, great. And then you can close that note, set it down, and move on with whatever's going on in your day. Sit comfortably. So, I do encourage you tonight, if you always sit in a certain way and you know that it works great for you and you want to sit that way, okay. But if you're like, there might be a more comfortable or rock solid way for me to sit, then I encourage you to try a slightly different posture. You still need to keep your spine straight. You still need to keep your chin parallel to the ground, your knees even with or below your hips. But you can try cross-legged seiza. Close eyes. Spine straight, eyes upturned. Relax. Watch the breath. Let go of all thoughts, worries, and cares. Be here now. When your mind wanders, you can also try different methods of letting go and returning to the breath. So, if what you always do is simply let go of the breath and return, or let go of the thought and return to the breath, you can practice saying the word in your head. Just say thought, which helps you to remember that this is not the end of the world. It's just a thought that you had. And that it's just being labeled and let go of rather than being judged. It's not bad thought. It's not bad meditation. It's just thought. And then we let go of that. If you try that, maybe you can try returning to a breathing exercise. You can take 5 breaths and count the breaths, maybe count the seconds of the breaths so that you can really refocus back on the breath. Try something just subtly different tonight with your meditation.